Attitudes to hernia belts. How was their usefulness perceived by the medical community of the 19th century? Part 3. 1893. Taken from a Treatise on Ruptures. By Jonathan F.C.H. Macready, 1850 to 1907. Fellow of the Royal College of Surgeons. Surgeon to the Great Northern Central Hospital and other institutions. Chapter 24. On the Construction and Application of Trusses. Pages 206 to 208. The action of the truss is intended not only to retain the rupture, but also to close the opening so perfectly and constantly that the parts are placed in the most favorable condition for cure. It was formerly supposed that the pressure of a truss might excite inflammation in the underlying parts and cause occlusion of the passage. Some instruments were specially devised for this purpose, and an account of them is given in the report of the Philadelphia Medical Society in 1837. But there is no sufficient evidence that truss cure results in this way. It has been shown in a former chapter that cure occurs almost solely during the period of development. If the hernia is kept completely reduced, the parts during growth recover themselves or acquire the necessary power of resistance, whilst the peritoneal diverticulum, sac, either recedes or becomes obliterated. Some surgeons hold that the ruptures of infancy and childhood can be certainly cured by an instrument, and that the parents may be promised a cure. The evidence in support of this contention is very difficult to lay hold of, but on the other hand, there is evidence that a large proportion of early ruptures are not cured, at least in this country. Therefore, it appears to me that a surgeon would not be prudent in promising a cure to any patient, no matter how young. But he may safely promise to almost all patients with oblique hernia that if the truss is worn with due care, the hernia will be so far cured that they will not be conscious of the rupture so long as the instrument is used. According to my observations, this may be said of the worst scrotal ruptures, even when the patient is advanced in years. But much more care and pains are required of the patient to achieve this result if the rupture has reached a large size. The improvement takes place gradually. A hernia which has been scrotal becomes a bubonocele, and at length ceases to appear, but it very soon gives warning of its return if the truss is laid aside. In a few cases, the cure is so perfect that no protrusion occurs, though the instrument is discontinued. With direct and with femoral hernia, the amelioration after wearing a suitable truss is not by any means so certain as in oblique inguinal, and the prognosis in those cases must always be guarded. When it is said that a rupture cannot be retained by a truss, it is generally because there is a defect in the instrument or a defect in its application. Every protrusion in the groin can be kept under restraint by mechanical means, but to this there are 3 exceptions. Firstly, when there is acidic fluid in the belly which descends into the sac, it cannot be prevented by an instrument from trickling down after reduction. No truss will keep up fluid. Secondly, in certain cases late in life when death is approaching, the health begins manifestly to decline, though no definite illness declares itself. The patient loses flesh, his appetite fails, and he looks ill. If such a person has a rupture, it soon becomes very troublesome. It is constantly down in spite of the truss, and nothing that the surgeon can do will keep it up. The tissues are so lax and the viscera so slippery that no machinery will hold them. Thirdly, in certain cases of direct hernia, the protrusion cannot be retained till after a long course of treatment. But for these 3 exceptions, every rupture which has not been subjected to operation can be retained by a truss. End of part 3.